I encounter a lot of Catholics who want to start a business, but they don't know where to begin or they lack direction. Today on Catholic Founders, I'll be sharing my story of starting my business and the principles that you can apply to your own situation to get your business started. Welcome back to the Catholic Founders podcast. If you are returning, thank you for your support. Please keep sharing the show. And if you're new here, the goal of this project is to build and enable an army of Catholic entrepreneurs who will use their businesses as a way to reinsert God into the world and into the culture. I'm your host, Silas Maynor. Each week we put out a Monday newsletter called Saintly CEO with tactical advice on how to run your business like a saint. And on Thursdays, we release a podcast, often with guests exploring how they integrate the faith into their businesses. All right, today we are talking about what are the principles that you need to start your business. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to share my story of starting my business because I went through the exact same thing. I see many Catholic entrepreneurs or Catholic want-to-be entrepreneurs that I encounter on a weekly basis. They're going through these same exact challenges that I went through a few years ago before I started my business. So I want to share this story and then also draw out the principles that you can apply to your own life to start your business. So let me take you back a bit. I grew up in the middle of nowhere, Wisconsin, oldest of 8 kids, big Catholic family, and I worked for my dad in his cabinet shop since I was like 8 or 9 years old. And as young as I can remember, I always wanted to have a business. I either wanted to take over his business or have one of my own. Eventually, that idea really shifted away from taking over his business and wanting to start my own. So when I turned 18, I didn't really have a true sense of direction because I had gone through this process of discerning the religious life, and I was very convinced that that's what I was called to do. But after God told me otherwise, I kind of felt a little bit of lack of directions. I went back to the default, right? I wanted to build my own business. I went and talked to my godfather, and he explained to me, hey, listen, if you want to start a business, one of the core skills you're going to need is sales. So you might as well come work for me at the Knights of Columbus. You'll learn how to do sales, and you'll get paid while you do it in the meantime. So I said, you know what, let's do it. So I did that for about a year and a half. I was quite good at it, but after about a year into it, I just realized like I wasn't really learning that much anymore. It wasn't truly my own business. I was a contractor for the Knights of Columbus, great company in many ways, but it just wasn't my thing. So I started kind of plucking around with trying out other ideas and just dabbling in other business ideas. I was going to start a marketing agency. A friend of mine and I started this business called Che Mate where we sold yerba mate from South America just for a little bit. Like we didn't really make any money doing it, but we didn't really lose any either. There's a lot of different things I was dabbling around with. Eventually, I ended up doing the Discover Praxis program, and that took me out to New York City where I landed a job as a headhunter. And I think that's kind of a core, I would say, a core turning point for my career generally. But the thing that happened was when I got this job in New York, I didn't really have a lot of savings. I went to New York with no real backup plan, and in my mind, it was make it or break it. I had to make it work. So I just really doubled down on really getting good at the job. And I think that's when I began to kind of drift away from the focus of starting my own business. I was like, I can't fail, so I got to get good at this. And I poured a lot of time and effort into getting good at the job and climbing up the ladder, getting promoted, building a team, etc. So it went really well, and I worked there. I ended up working there for 4 years. And I think that during this time, I did have in mind that I was going to start a business. I think my original plan, if I recall correctly, was once I joined, I said, in about 5 years, I want to start my own clean tech incubator of sorts. I want to start building companies in the clean tech space. So I ended up doing some side projects to try to prepare for that, right? My goal was to get some sort of recognition or notoriety in the space. So I started with this idea that I'm going to build a podcast. I had never done a professional podcast before then. So I launched this thing called The Deliberate Zoomer. We did like a 10-part series helping Gen Z like figure out their career objectives. This was just a pilot to prove that I can make a higher quality podcast than I had in the past, which I won't even go there how I did in the past, but did that and then use that to then start the Clean Techies podcast, which has been going since February of 2021. And the goal there was to just gain some recognition in the space. And truth be told, I was a little bit late to the party. A lot of people had started podcasts or newsletters during COVID, and as a result, like they kind of popped off earlier than I did because I got started about a year later. But throughout doing these side projects, in hindsight, doing these side projects kind of helped me scratch the itch of entrepreneurship, but not enough that I really was motivated to go start my own business. As a result, I think it just kept me going, and it was a sense of, you're doing a great job. You're doing something, right? You are being an entrepreneur. But in reality, I was not, right? These are just side projects that barely made any money, if at all, right? In most cases, they actually the podcast itself actually lost money for quite a long time as an entity in itself. Obviously, it would help me bring in business, but that was about it. So when I look back at this whole story, this is 4 years with this company called Next Wave. When I think about this, and why I hesitated to start my own business. There's a lot of interesting points. So we actually sold the business in 2022, and I would have been 23 at the time, and I got a decent payout from it. It wasn't life-changing money, but if I had wanted to start my own business, that would have been the perfect time. I could have moved back to Wisconsin, had probably, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years of expenses for me because Wisconsin's much cheaper, and I could have launched a business then. But I was about to propose to my then girlfriend, and I thought, I'm just gonna wait. I made these excuses. I'm just gonna wait. Let's get married. We'll pay for the wedding and all that stuff will be taken care of, and then I'll look at considering this. So fast forward about a year later, I got married, and then a couple months into marriage, that's when I started to recognize that the itch for entrepreneurship had definitely not gone away. I was just very distracted with preparing for the wedding and everything the year prior. And this is where I want to pause to mention that leading up to this point, my idea of entrepreneurship was always centered around something innovative, something big, something just different, right? And now that I was married, the way I looked at entrepreneurship shifted quite a lot because my priorities had changed, right? This was no longer just about doing something big that could have a hypothetical large outcome. It was about doing something concrete so that I could provide for my family if I did make this leap for entrepreneurship. And is that the right way to look at it? I don't know exactly, but that's how it shifted for me, and I assume that's the same for other people. It's like there was a need to put food on the table, and the idea of entrepreneurship was no longer something around just kind of ambiguous ideas that could be cool. It was around how can I make money to provide for my family. And it was around this time, once I again recognized that itch, that I started going back to my mentors and I started asking them just about getting started or just advice on how to move things forward. And one of them actually walked me through their decision and their thought process when they started their business years prior, their first business. And at the time, this guy had a wife and I think 2 kids already and a mortgage. So he told me, listen, I imagined if I start my business and I have to burn through my savings, burn through my 401k, even taking all the penalties and everything, maybe I have to sell my house. Maybe I have to move in with my parents. He visualized every single step that he'd have to take in order to pursue this dream of entrepreneurship. And he asked himself, is it worth it to me? And the answer was a resounding yes. So he said, you know what? I'm going to do it. And it's actually funny enough, he had started his career in the recruitment space as well. But once he laid that out to me, once he made that concrete, I did the math in my own head and I said, oh, well, actually, I could do that too. Like, I visualized what it would be like to have all of those quote unquote bad things happen to me. And I was like, wow, this is actually not that bad. Like, the real outcome is truly not as bad as we often make it out to be. So once I had those two things in mind, the clear understanding of how much it was going to cost me or what the potential negative outcomes would be, and the fact that I was no longer focused on these innovative, like crazy harebrained ideas, I was just going to do something I knew how to do. I had resolved that by the end of 2024, which would have been the end of the following year, I was going to start my own recruitment consultancy. No more big crazy ideas, just do something that I knew how to do and that could pay the bills. Are you looking to hire people who actually care about your mission? You should get in touch with Verso Jobs. Verso Jobs is a platform that uses a gamified application process to find candidates who actually have the right skills and mission alignment with your team. Joe and the team at Verso Jobs first understand your needs, then they go out and they headhunt the best candidates and present you with highly aligned profiles in very short order, oftentimes turning around profiles within a few days or a week. They also won't break the bank, so whether you're hiring for your startup, school, parish, or nonprofit, Verso makes it easy to find mission-aligned talent ready to build the kingdom. Visit versojobs.com to get started. That's Verso, V-E-R-S-O jobs.com. To the heights. So then to take you through the rest of the story here, right around that time, we had decided that we were going to move back to Wisconsin. There's various reasons for that. It's a whole story in itself, but it just didn't feel like New York was the place to be for us anymore. There was a lot of things changing with the company, and overall, it just felt like God was calling us to move back to Wisconsin, to a place that was a little bit, I guess you could say, safer. So I had family around. Obviously, we were starting our family at the time, so a lot of different reasons, but we moved back to Wisconsin. About a month later, this would have been March of 2024. I remember that I had a call set up early in the morning with this guy I really looked up to. I would consider him a mentor now. But at the time, I was just meeting him for the first time, and we walked through. I was just kind of, it was on my mind, like starting the business and everything. We walked through all these things, and he also said, "Hey, basically, what are you waiting for, man? You've got enough money saved up. You're in a low cost of living area. Just like, what's the worst case you could do? Just get started. Start maybe like landing some clients on the side and doing some moonlighting in the background." And it was a great call. And I was like, you know what? This is really good. A couple hours later, one of my other mentors, my godfather actually, just calls me out of the blue. and we have effectively the same conversation. And maybe it's because it was on my mind, but the conversation ended up leading to this point where he also says to me, "Hey, what are you waiting for? You've got enough money saved up. Just file your paperwork and start doing things on the side. Start moonlighting." So he said, "You know what? I'm going to do that." I remember a couple hours later, I filed my paperwork. It's super easy to do in the state of Wisconsin. Filed my LLC, and I was like, "Okay, this is cool. I'm going to start kind of like maybe working on this on the side. Maybe in a couple months, I'll get things going for real." Later that day, my boss and the founder of the company had a call with me, and I thought it was just some kind of routine catch-up call. We had these calls a lot of times in the evening because my boss and the founder were in another country. But it turns out they say, "Hey, this new CEO that's come in, he wants to change directions and he wants you to go back to a different desk." And in recruitment, there's basically focus areas. And I had intentionally left that desk that he wanted me to go back to because I didn't really enjoy it that much, and I wanted to focus on this other innovative stuff. And so in my mind, I was like, "There's no way I am doing this. There's no way. All of these things that happened today, this is a sign from God that I'm meant to go and start this business." Obviously, I said, "Oh yeah, yeah, I can do that. I can make that work." I was very agreeable on the call, but in my mind, I was like, "This is a clear sign that God is calling me to start my own business." I mentioned that the previous year there's just a lot of signs that were not positive. Obviously I was a little distracted with preparing for and getting married, so that was kind of taking my focus a little bit away from work. But on top of that, we had a really, really rough market for the recruitment sector where I had started the year with 4 people on my team and ended with 0. I had to slowly let the team go throughout the year for lack of performance, and it was just rough. I was basically back to square one, building my own desk from scratch with the company. And for a period of like 3 or 4 months leading up to this conversation with my boss, I was just doing like rigorous business development, harder, like hitting the market harder than I had ever done. And I was unable to land clients. Was not happening. Now that I filed my paperwork, the next 3 weeks, I signed 3 new clients on my own. I signed 3 people that committed to work with me, obviously at lower rates, because that's the whole objective with the business I run is I charge half the rates of other firms. And that may have had something to do with it, but at the same time, 3 new clients in 3 weeks after having 3 or 4 months of just like relentless business development with no conversions, it was really challenging. So that also to me stood out as a sign that this was like, hey, God is like saying, hey, just get going. You're going to be all right. So I get those 3 new clients. About 3 weeks later, give or take, right around that time, I end up putting in my resignation letter on April 1st. No, it was not an April Fool's joke, but I put in my resignation. And I spent the next month kind of getting things in order, and I publicly launched the business on May 1st, the Feast of St. Joseph the Worker, 2024. That's also the same day I launched Catholic Founders. That's a whole nother story in itself, but that's the day we launched Catholic Founders Project. These next few months that ensue they initially look really good. I've got a client lined up really quickly. We've got a guy who accepts an offer, and last minute he accepts a counteroffer from another company. This is something that happens to recruiters, but for me personally, it happened very few times. I think maybe 3 times in my entire 4 years of doing this before this, and then it happens on this first deal that I had pulled through, and it was pretty devastating and frustrating. However, I was resigned to the outcome. Like I said, this is in God's hands. I believe that He's called me to do this, so I'm just going to trust in Him. So that was a relatively rough start. It looked good, then it didn't seem so good, and then I was struggling to get a couple more clients there, and in the end, out of nowhere, on the Feast of Our Lady of Mount Carmel, I won't forget it, this individual that I had met with, I don't know, maybe twice, I introduced him to a potential co-founder role maybe 9, 10 months prior. He reaches out and says, hey, I got a new job as a CEO of this joint venture with these large automakers, and I need to hire a team of at least 8 people, and I want you to help me. And there was a little bit of a bidding process, but basically in a week or so, we signed the contract, got the retainers in the door, and that ended up turning into about $100,000 worth of work. It was a struggle, and then I give credit to Our Lady of Mount Carmel for bringing that work to me. Later on that year, I guess just to wrap up the story here, we ended up hitting roughly like a little under $140,000 in revenue. So the bills were paid, and it was clearly working, right? But it was really close to that time where I was about to give up. I was like, hey, I've got basically a month or 2 more here before I have to decide I'm going to start looking for another job. I also want to add into the story here that it was around the time that I decided to put in my resignation that my wife told us we were expecting a baby. So I was like, we just moved. We got married within a year. We've moved, and I'm about to start my own business, and we're expecting a baby, all within the course of 12 months. Honestly, most people would tell me I'm absolutely crazy, but I did feel like it was God calling me to it, and my wife was very supportive of that. So let's pause here. I could tell you many more details about the story, but I want to rewind and let's kind of pull out these core principles that'll be helpful for you as you're deciding whether or not to start your own business or you're looking for direction as you're just getting going. So number one is you need to make a commitment. Do you really want to be an entrepreneur or not? If you do want it, you need to take concrete steps towards it. Don't just play around with side projects like I was doing. You need to have something really concrete that you're going to move towards. I think this idea of side projects is really glamorized these days because in many cases, people just think, hey, I'm going to try this thing out on the weekend and maybe it'll pop off and it'll turn into something amazing and I'll just go from there. The reality is not usually that, right? Usually you got to put a lot of focus and effort and energy into actually making something successful. It's not just going to be a little bit of effort and people are just going to want this thing and it comes out flying out of my hands, right? That is the case very, very rarely. Most of the time, it requires a substantial amount of effort in order for it to pop off. So, if you really want to be an entrepreneur, you got to ask yourself, am I going to, mess around with side projects on the weekends, or am I going to set a concrete objective and make concrete steps every single evening or weekend to move towards that goal of building my own business? This is basically what kept me from starting my own thing for so long. The second principle is that you need to understand your burn. What I mean by that is your family's monthly expenses. Do you understand how much you need to get by? And I'm not talking about what do you need to live a life of luxury, just the basics. What do you need to get your rent paid, groceries bought, everything that you need just for your family. We're not talking about taking a vacation every 3 months or anything like that. Just what do you need for your family to get by? Now, you do need to keep in mind that this does not mean your business can only make as much money as your monthly expenses for your family. You will have more expenses than just your monthly family expenses. Your business itself will have expenses. So you got to calculate money on top of the money that you need to make as a family. Once you understand that monthly burn, that, hey, we need 3, 4, 5 grand a month in order to get by to pay our bills, and you can extrapolate that out, say, okay, that means I need 6 months or I need 12 months worth of burn in order to make it work. That gives you a clear, concise target as to how much money you need saved up before you can pull the plug and go for it. There's no more ambiguous fear of like, will I be able to pay the bills? It's very concrete. It's very clear. You'll know exactly what you need financially to make it work. Third principle is you need to get concrete about how you're going to make money, right? My biggest issue leading up to this was that I was thinking about all kinds of ideas or crazy ideas. I was looking for something that would feel like it could make sense and feel like it could be really big. But in reality, I was just doing things that were kind of nonsense. Like I was doing things that had no concrete way for sure of making money, and I only kind of put those ideas aside once I got to the point of, hey, I've got a family, I've got to put food on the table. I'm going to do something that I know how to make money. So if you are in a space where you're doing something like I was doing, consulting or some sort of service, it should be relatively easy for you to know how much money you can make and how concrete that is, right? Because you've been doing it most likely. If you're trying to pursue something that's different, you need to go out and figure out for the market, how much can I charge? How many clients do I need to land per month? And just do the math of how you're concretely going to make money. It can't just be this idea that, hey, I'm going to make money, it's going to be fine, everything's going to work out well. You have to get very concrete about the process, okay? Again, in my situation, I knew the business. I had been doing this for 4 years. I knew how it works. I knew how to sell, and I knew how much I could charge. So there was zero ambiguity. I knew exactly how much money I could hypothetically make, and I knew the steps to get there. Number 4, the fourth principle, and this one goes really hand in hand with number 3, is that you need to not pursue crazy ideas. We talked about this before. If you do not know what you're getting into, if you do not know how it's going to work, the business model, you're probably doing the wrong thing, right? These two things go hand in hand. Entrepreneurship is not about crazy ideas and building the next Airbnb. That is what it's meant to be for a segment of people. But this is a very different type of entrepreneurship than the average entrepreneurship that most of us are called to. Small business America, there's many ways that you can just make a good living and have control of your time. That does not require you going out and raising venture dollars and building the next Airbnb or Uber. Okay, this is very, very important to understand. You have to get concrete with how you're going to make things work. Either pursue something that you've already been doing in another company that you know how to do, you know how to make money, or maybe go after something that other people have done hundreds or thousands of times, something that's a well-trodden path. The typical thing that everybody's pursuing these days is like a window washing business, these kind of home services types things. Again, a lot of people make fun of those people for pursuing those ideas, but the reality is they're proven. And a lot of the people doing those things right now are not executing well. They're kind of haphazardly going after it. And if you come in with intention, virtue, and effort, you can do way better than they are, and you can win business and you can provide for your family. So this idea of entrepreneurship being kind of all about, I've got this invention, I'm going to put a patent on it. These are nonsense, right? The number of people I've encountered who have patented some idea but never executed on it are numberless. There's just so many of these people, and there's a lot of people who will patent an idea, and then they'll talk about ideas, and they get really upset when somebody else takes their idea or a version of their idea and runs with it. The truth is, execution is all that matters, especially at the early days of getting your business going. You cannot be so wrapped up in this thing about ideas are important. Ideas are nothing without execution. And I really need everybody here to understand that and internalize it deeply. Hey there, quick interruption. If your business is growing and you're looking for support, reach out to us today. My executive assistant, Karen, and I are helping virtual assistants in the Philippines get jobs with Catholic businesses, and we're calling it Paraclete VA. This is an opportunity for you to get strong support without breaking the bank financially. Doing this also helps Catholic VAs in the Philippines and other places get better jobs with employers that won't ask them to compromise their morals, something that, frequently happens more often than you'd like to know. Reach out with what you're looking for at dearcfpod@gmail.com, and we will find some top folks with the skills that you need. We'll present them to you, and if you hire somebody, you pay us a fee of $500, then $500 if you're still happy with them after 30 days in. Please note, we are not an employer of record, so we are not the ones paying them. You will be paying them as a contractor. We can help you facilitate best practices there, but we are not the employer. You will still be paying them directly. If this is something of interest to you, reach out today. Again, dearcfpod@gmail.com with a little bit about what you're looking for and change the life of a family today. All right, back to the show. All right, so the following are less so principles and more so just advice as you get going. I'm going to still call them principles though. The fifth principle is you need to have your ICP 100 picked out. Basically, your ideal customer profile. What are those top 100 customers that you can have? Pick a niche, right? With recruitment, for me, it was I'm doing recruitment in the clean tech sector. I even debated going further niche and saying I'm just going to do clean tech recruitment for sales roles for clean tech companies. Going niche is really important because when you make your pitch, if people understand that, oh wow, this person is selling exactly to what I need, like they are directly hitting my needs, it makes a lot more sense. If I just said I'm a recruiter, that doesn't mean a lot to many people when they hear that. Oh, another recruiter, cool. But if I say I help clean tech startups recruit sales talent, anybody who's a clean tech founder or hiring manager who needs to hire sales talent, they know that I'm the guy for them. This is very important to pick a niche. But once you pick a niche, you can then identify who are your ideal 100 customers. Write them out, connect them on LinkedIn, and start to create value for them, whether that's through content or just getting to know them, figuring out what's going on. If you have a clear list of who to go after, it's very, very simple. One thing that you can use as a little tip here is if you are familiar going to industry conferences or events and you're relatively well known, people know who you are. I mean, not everybody obviously has to know who you are, but you know people there. You're a recognized face. It's almost like catching up with friends when you go there. That's a sign that you're relatively well known or well socialized with the people in the space, with your potential customers. And that will be very helpful when you start going out. If you're going to a brand new market, you should really understand the market and get familiarized with it before you just full on send your way into it. You need to understand how people work in every space and understand concretely who are the customers I'm going to reach out to. Get this very clear. Number 6, commit with an end date in mind. When I started my business, I said basically, I have about a year worth of burn. I'm going to give myself 6 months to see if this thing is working. If it's not working in 6 months with me giving a full effort, then I know it's not meant for me, right? I'm going to put my faith life and my family life in my calendar, those core buckets, those core blocks of time that I need for God and my family. And effectively, the rest of my time is going to be dedicated towards building this business. So I know that if I do not end up succeeding after 6 months, if things are not working, it's not because I didn't try. It's because God did not want me to do that. And if that's the outcome, that's fine. Even though I felt strong conviction that God was calling me to do this, I also recognize that, hey, he may be calling me to do this, but that doesn't mean this is going to be the thing I'm going to be doing for the next 50 years. This could be the thing that he's calling me to right now for me to learn a lesson. And if that's all it is, it's an expensive lesson, that's okay. I trust in God that he was calling me to do it, and I'm going to commit to it. So have an end date in mind. This is very, very important. I usually recommend at least 6 months of trying full commitment to this opportunity. 9 months is more ideal, but at least 6 months. If you do less than 6 months, there's no way to tell if you're truly getting traction and going, because every business requires sales. And with most sales roles, regardless of what you're selling, 6 months is a time that you can figure out what you're doing wrong, and you can really start to build a pipeline to get things consistent, especially at the more enterprise sale level. So very important that you give yourself at least 6 months plus 3 to 6 months beyond that of runway to then get a new job if you decide to pull the plug and go back to looking for a job. This is again another way to take away ambiguity around what's going on, because many entrepreneurs, they're just like, oh no, it will work. I know it will work. And then there ends up being relationship issues with their family, where it's like, hey, what are you doing? Like, we need to put food on the table, and there just becomes conflict. Whereas if you have a concrete outcome or a concrete date in mind, you know what you're working towards, and everybody else does too, so it's very clear. Number 7, and I mentioned this already to an extent, but you have to relinquish the outcome to God. When I started this, I was fully aware that it may not work, and that's okay, but I'm going to work as hard as I can, and I'm going to leave the outcome to God. If this works for 6 months and it fails, so be it. If it works for 10 years and then it's time to move on, so be it as well. If it's something I do for the rest of my life and I never sell the business, also, thank you, praise be to God, right? The whole point is you have to relinquish the outcome to God, because the reason we're pursuing entrepreneurship is not for our own glory. It ought not to be, at least. If that is your reason, you need to really go deep into your soul and understand, why am I doing this? Am I doing this because I want to be recognized, because I want fame or money? Is that the reason I'm doing it? If so, I need to purify. I need to ask for the grace to purify those desires, to do this for God, because God is calling me to be an entrepreneur. He's calling me to lean into this co-creative nature that I have as a being created in the image and likeness of God. And that through this business, I will be able to provide for my family, maybe for many other families as well. And I can use the impact and the outcomes I have to influence the world for God's will. And again, this is not even about you deciding what that is. It's oftentimes going to just be something you're guided towards throughout the process of being involved with this entrepreneurial journey. God will call you if you're praying. He will call you to what you have to do, to how you have to invest in the community, where to give your donations, etc. It's all a way of uniting yourself more fully to what God is calling you to, so that you are much more of an autonomous being that he can use for greater things than if you're just simply working some kind of like hourly wage job. Again, nothing wrong with that, but many of us are called to lean into this entrepreneurial bent that we have, that's built into our DNA. As I will put one other caveat here, is that you need to ensure that your spiritual life is not taking a hit. Just because you're starting a business and it's hard does not mean you should stop praying your daily rosary, going to daily mass. Like, these things should remain there, because at the end of the day, your spiritual life is far more important than any of your earthly success. And I know people say this, and a lot of times people are like, yeah, I get it. I really mean this. Listen to this. Your spiritual life is much, much more important than any earthly success, financial success, putting food on the table, everything. If you work your whole life just to work yourself to the bone, just to put food on the table, yet your spiritual life is nothing, what are you going to think about at the end of time when you have to face God? If you face God and you barely know him, if he's a stranger to you, none of that effort of providing for your family was really worth it, right? This cannot be sacrificed when you start your business. Please understand this, that you need to keep your spiritual life number one as you're starting the business for the first 6 months, or as you get going. Trust me, you will not regret it. Number 8, you need to get your spouse on board. This goes along with the end date in mind, but if you just start your business and your spouse is not on board, not supportive, it's going to be challenging. They're going to be questioning why you're doing it, and it's going to be very, very difficult. However, if you have an end date in mind, they know, listen, he's committed, she's committed to this particular outcome, and I'm going to support them throughout this. Now, you do need to keep in mind that do not bring all of your work challenges home and dump them on them. In many cases, spouses do not want to hear this. At least I know my wife does not like to hear this. There's many times where I talk about the challenges of the business, and she gets pretty stressed out about it, when in reality, it's actually not that stressful to me. I'm just kind of venting. But in reality, it's hard for her. So just keep in mind, depending on your dynamic with your spouse, you do not necessarily want to be bringing all those things from your business and then dumping them on your spouse. But you do need to have your spouse in your corner, because if you don't, it will be really challenging. There's a lot of business owners who have failed miserably because effectively their spouse was sabotaging what they wanted to achieve. Instead of unloading everything on your spouse, you should get a peer or a mentor of some sort that you can relate these things to. Number 9, and this is not necessarily a principle, this is just a sort of another option that you can consider, is that instead of committing fully and just going, full bore, 6 months, I'm going to build this thing, and then if it's not working, I'll quit. You can also just build your way out of your job. Some people can say, hey, listen, every evening I'm going to dedicate 3-4 hours to just building this side business and building my way, replacing my income, and building my way out of my current job. If you can do that and sustain that for whatever, 6-12 months to get to that outcome, I also commend you on that. That's a good way to do things. That's a little bit less risky, I guess you could say. In some ways, I think it's hedging. I think if God is calling you to entrepreneurship, don't discount the abilities that and the grace that he'll give you to make that happen. But this is another way. If you are really afraid of the situation and you want to just make sure that it's working, you can do this kind of on the side thing. If you're trying to pursue a more harebrained idea, like I mentioned not to do earlier, again, nothing wrong with those ideas, but if you're trying to do something that's really innovative and new, this would be another good way to test out, do people actually like this idea? Are people willing to pay for this? That's the thing that matters most. It's not about whether or not people like the idea. It's about, are people willing to pay for it? If you're not familiar, I'd recommend reading this book called The Mom Test, which helps you basically identify whether or not a product is of interest to the market genuinely, and if they'll pay for it, and take steps to figure that out without having to invest a lot of money. If you are going to go this route of trying to replace your income, usually people would go like, once I get to like 1.2x my current monthly income, then you can pull the plug. But you got to remember that, again, if you do this, a lot of people I know will constantly hedge. Like they've gotten to a point where they've replaced their monthly income and they're still hedging, and they say, oh, I can't go yet. I can't do this yet. It's a severe lack of trust in God, if you ask me, right? I think that trusting in God for your daily bread, like we pray in the Our Father, is really important, and we can't discount these things. So do not forget that if you go that route, do not use it as a method of procrastination, okay? Just use it as a method of like discern whether or not that's the way to go, and then go that way. So those are my 9 principles. I hope you like them. I do want to just point out here that there's a theme to all these, right? And it's clarity. No ambiguity allowed. When we have ambiguity, we have fear. But once things are clear, there is no fear. If you understand exactly what the future looks like or what the hypothetical outcomes look like, it's impossible to have fear. The only reason you're afraid of the dark is because you can't see what's in there. But when you turn the lights on, there's no reason to be afraid. You can see exactly what you're looking at. So most of the procrastination that comes from entrepreneurs or wannabe entrepreneurs is simply a lack of clarity. They are afraid because they have ambiguity around what they do. And I will say, I'm not the one who come up with this idea. This is something Alex Hormozy talks about ad nauseum, that fear is ambiguity, and clarity, basically there's no room for fear when there is clarity, when you know exactly the concrete steps you have to take. So that's a core theme with all of these points: understanding the timeline, how much money you need to make on a monthly basis, how long you're going to commit to this, does your spouse know what's going on, do you know how you're going to make money? All of these things are just basically getting clarity and pursuing those things with intention and reason. So let's recap these principles. Number 1, make a commitment. Do you really want to be an entrepreneur? Number 2, understand how much your monthly burn is that your family needs. How much money does your family need to make this thing work, and how much money will you need for 12 months of this? Number 3, get concrete about how you're going to make money. If you do not know what the business model is or how you're going to charge, you're doing something incorrect. Figure out how to make money. Number 4, do not pursue crazy ideas. If you care about getting going and just doing things to make it work, you need to pursue things that are well-trodden paths, brand new harebrained ideas. Number 5, pick your niche. Find your ideal 100 clients and pursue them relentlessly. Number 6, commit with an end date in mind. Give yourself at least 6 months to get going, commit fully to it, and then 3 to 6 months thereafter to find a new role. If you can, I recommend giving yourself 9 months to get the business going. Have that end date in mind. Number 7, relinquish the outcome to God. This is not about success. Success does not mean actually making it work. It means doing what God is calling you to. And that could be the failure of the business, the closing of the business. Relinquish the outcome to God. Trust me on this one. You'll thank me later. Number 8, get your spouse on board. If you do not have your spouse on board, it's going to be very tough sledding. But also, if you get your spouse on board with the clarity of the timeline, they will be much more supportive. Number 9, you can also build your way out. You can have an option to just replace your monthly income. So those are our 9 principles. I hope you enjoyed this. As a word of encouragement before I leave you, if you're one of those people who is in this situation, who's debating taking the leap, pray about it. Run the numbers like we talked about. Do not be delusional, right? Don't just say, oh, like, I'm just going to make $1 million. It's going to be so easy. Like, be very honest about the outcome, and then have trust in God. Because you have to remember, we are created in the image and likeness of God. We are co-creators with God, effectively. And being an entrepreneur is part of our nature. Creating things is part of our nature. Obviously, we do this through marriage with our children, but it's another way that we can lean into this co-creative mentality or nature is by building businesses. And you can lean into that. Through leaning into that, you are answering the call that God has given you to subdue the earth, to work, right? It's a very positive thing, and it's not something that's about money actually at all. The reality is the nature, the motion of being a co-creator, of building something, right? Lean into that. And don't hold yourself back, because God might be calling you to something really, really big, bigger than even you can dream of. Just imagine the situation of St. Paul, right? Do you think St. Paul set out thinking how much he could achieve? If he did have this idea of like, oh, I could do this, I could convert these many souls, I guarantee you that his perception of what was possible was nowhere near the outcome of what is real today. God can achieve way more through you and through me than we even understand of ourselves. So don't hold yourself back. Another temptation that people have is to say, "Oh, I'm not meant for this. I'm not meant to do big things." That's not true. God is the one who decides what you're meant to do or not to do. And even if you're only called to do small things, to be like Saint Therese and to do little things with great love, that's still a great thing. You're focusing on being great in the small and the nuance rather than pursuing grandiose ideas. Either way, you're called to greatness. So do not relinquish this to others, right? The reason the world is the way it is because in many cases, Catholics have abdicated the role of innovation and leadership in the world. Okay, we cannot have this. This is not the time to do this. This is the time to step up and allow God to act through us. We don't even have to know the plans. We don't have to be a genius at business. We just have to trust in God and do His work, and He will take care of the rest. All right, thank you for tuning in to this episode of Catholic Founders. If you would like to join a group of other Catholic business owners to help you figure out what your next steps are, or to just get more clear on the steps you are taking, you can join the Catholic Founders Guild today. It's only $10 a month or $100 a year. And to join the Guild, all you have to do is go to our Substack and upgrade to a paid membership. You just go to CatholicFounders.com/subscribe and choose any paid tier, and we'll get you added to the Catholic Founders Guild. Obviously, everybody is screened to make sure you're a good fit for the group, but you can go there, upgrade to paid, and we'll get the process going from there. If you like the content, please do share with other current or aspiring Catholic business owners, and God bless you, and happy building.